Today in geometry we're going to talk about conditional statements. Now, when we normally talk about conditional statements, they usually have an if-then part that we're going to talk about. Now, a lot of times in ads you may hear, if you're not completely satisfied, then your money will be refunded. That is an if-then statement. So, usually these conditionals have a hypothesis and a conclusion. Typically, the hypothesis is seen as the if part, and the conclusion is seen as the then part or the then clause of what you're looking at. So I usually use some kind of a highlighter technique when I do this. So when it talks about identifying the hypothesis and conclusion, typically I will mark the hypothesis and then go down here in the actual sentence and mark it. So the sentence says, if two lines intersect to form right angles, then they are perpendicular. So this part right here would be considered the hypothesis. It's the if part of the sentence, but notice I did not include the if, that actual word in there. Conclusion is the then part of the sentence. But just like before, I'm not going to include them, but I'm going to include everything else. So this part right here tells us that the conclusion would be that they are perpendicular. Okay, now we've talked about a converse a little bit in this last section. So a converse, when you're writing it, is when you actually take the hypothesis and the conclusion and you switch them. Okay, so here's my example. Write a converse for the following. If you eat your vegetables, then you will grow strong. So my job is to switch the if and the then. So instead of vegetables going first, growing will go first. So if you grow, then you ate your vegetables. Now this is a completely non-math example, but it's to get you an idea of how to write it. And remember, just because you write it doesn't make it true. So far they have not asked us for the truth statement in this, so don't be thrown off by that. Okay, here's another example. Identify the hypothesis. Oops, wrong color. Try again here. Identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of the following statement. So if two lines are parallel, then the lines are coplanar. So the if part is the hypothesis. Everything's included but the actual word if. The conclusion is everything that's after the then. So my conclusion would be that the lines are coplanar. Now, a lot of times you may get statements, that are made that are written more in sentences, and they're not really in the kind of form that we want for a conditional. If we want something to be a conditional, it has to be written kind of this if-then form. So, now remember, there are a couple different ways I could do this. One way would be if it is an acute angle, then its measure is less than 90. I could have also done that backwards. I could have said, if an angle has a measurement that is less than 90, then it's an acute angle. But I want to find some way to make a sentence out of it based on the way that this was written, was trying to honor the fact that the acute came first and 90 came second in the one that I made.